So these messages have derailed the Prime Minister's attempted reset.
Yeah, well, the Prime Minister has described these scathing text messages as anonymous sledging, and he says he's confident that they don't involve one of his federal cabinet colleagues. Now, the Prime Minister has faced a second day of questions about these messages that were revealed at the National Press Club yesterday. These messages allegedly sent by the former New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian to an unnamed Liberal cabinet colleague. And in them, apparently she's said, or she's reportedly said, that Mr Morrison is a horrible person, she doesn't trust him, and that he's more concerned with politics than people. Now, the unknown Liberal minister involved is reportedly called Mr Morrison a fraud and a complete psycho. For context, these messages were apparently sent back during the catastrophic bushfires in late 2019-2020, and reporting is unclear as to whether they involved a federal or state cabinet minister. But the Prime Minister says he's confident it's not one of his federal colleagues. When asked, former Premier Gladys Berejiklian didn't deny sending the messages, although she says she has no recollection of that exchange. And when Scott Morrison was asked about these questions today, he dismissed them as Canberra gossip. Here's what he had to say.
The scuttlebutt that runs around Canberra, who cares? What matters to people and their jobs, what matters to keeping the cost of living down, electricity prices down by 8%, what matters to ensure we keep downward pressure on interest rates. You know, we've kept our AAA credit rating in this country from all three major agencies in the middle of a pandemic, and at the same time having to do the biggest single economic intervention for income support in our nation's history.
Now, it was, of course, only a couple of weeks ago that the Prime Minister was trying to convince the former Premier to make the switch into federal politics. Her successor today, Dominic Perrottet, has defended the Prime Minister. He's described him as a decent man and says that it's a terrible thing that these messages are being circulated. Of course, no doubt this whole incident has handed the opposition leader some ammunition. He says that Mr Morrison, that these messages demonstrate that Mr Morrison isn't fit to be Prime Minister. Take a listen.
The statement from the former Premier, or the Premier at the time, where she said this: lives are at stake today and he's just obsessed with petty political point scoring, I think is devastating. I think that alone is enough to disqualify him from being someone who secures a second decade in office. Australians deserve better than that.
And North, Scott Morrison is trying to talk up the Coalition's economic credentials and jobs today.
Well, that's right. The Prime Minister was out in Western Sydney at a RAAF base in Richmond, and he's attempting to pivot the conversation towards jobs and the economic recovery going forward, which he perceives to be more comfortable territory for the Coalition. But his attempted reset yesterday at the National Press Club didn't go according to plan. Both those text messages that were allegedly sent by Gladys Berejiklian, as well as another question, have dominated the conversation. He was asked whether he knew the cost of everyday items, including milk and bread. He has described that as a gotcha question, and today was laughing that off in his early morning media blitz. But the Prime Minister says that the Coalition believes that he believes that the Coalition is best placed to reduce unemployment in Australia. He says that he believes that can hit under 4% this year, in the second half of this year, which hasn't happened in half a century. So while the Prime Minister wants to be talking about those issues, there is no doubt that they have been overshadowed by these damaging text messages that have been leaked. We don't know by who at this stage, and also those questions about cost of living pressures for all Australians. Roz?
No, thanks.